The void of space held many secrets, but none quite like the massive warship that drifted silently through the darkness. Captain Vextar stared at the readings on his screen with growing excitement. His Zephyrian scout fleet had been patrolling the outer edges of what used to be human space when they found it. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of his flagship. Its hull was dark gray metal, scarred with countless battle wounds. Strange symbols covered its sides, and alien weapon ports dotted its surface like sleeping eyes. But what made Vexitar's hearts race was the complete lack of power signatures. The ship was dead in space. "Sir, initial scans show no active systems," reported his sensor officer, her 4 arms dancing across the control panel. "The vessel appears to be of human origin, based on the design patterns." Vextar clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction. Humans had been extinct for over 300 years, wiped out during the Great Exodus War. Their technology had always been primitive compared to Zephyrian science, but some of their weapons had proven surprisingly effective. A derelict human warship could contain valuable salvage. "Launch boarding pods," he ordered. "I want a full team aboard that vessel within the hour." Lieutenant Kralnex checked his equipment one final time as the boarding pod approached the human ship. He commanded a squad of 12 elite Zephyrian warriors, each armed with plasma rifles and scanning devices. Through the pod's window, he could see the alien vessel growing larger. Up close, the battle damage was even more impressive. Massive holes had been burned through sections of the hull, but emergency force fields had sealed them long ago. The pod attached to what appeared to be a docking port with a soft thud. Kralnex's scanner showed atmosphere on the other side, though it was thin and cold. His team activated their breathing masks and weapons before cutting through the airlock. The corridors beyond were dark except for weak emergency lighting that cast red shadows on the walls. The air smelled of metal and something else the Zephyrians couldn't identify. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the narrow passages. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered one of his soldiers, a young female named Zixara. Her scanner beeped softly as she checked for life signs. "Stay focused," Kralnex replied, though he felt the same unease. Something about this ship felt wrong. It was too quiet, too preserved. Most derelicts they'd explored showed signs of age and decay. This vessel looked like its crew had simply vanished yesterday. They moved deeper into the ship, following what appeared to be a main corridor. Strange symbols covered the walls, along with what looked like warning signs in the human language. Their universal translators struggled with the ancient text, offering only fragments like "authorized personnel only" and "danger." The first discovery came when they reached what was clearly the ship's medical bay. Rows of white pods lined the walls, each one sealed and glowing with a faint blue light. Kralnex approached one carefully, his scanner working to penetrate the pod's surface. "Lieutenant," Zixara called out, her voice tight with surprise. "You need to see this." Inside the pod was a human, male, middle-aged, with short brown hair and a peaceful expression. He appeared to be sleeping, but the pod's readings showed brain activity and a slow but steady heartbeat. "They're alive," Kralnex breathed. "The humans are still alive." His team quickly scanned the other pods. Dozens of humans lay sleeping in the medical bay alone. Men and women of various ages, all perfectly preserved in some kind of advanced stasis system. The Zephyrians had heard stories about human cold sleep technology, but they'd never seen it in operation. "Sir, should we wake them?" asked another soldier. "Absolutely not," Kralnex replied quickly. "We don't know what diseases they might carry, or how they'll react to seeing us. Continue the survey." As they explored further, they found more sleeping humans throughout the ship. The crew quarters held hundreds of stasis pods. Engineering sections contained sleeping technicians still wearing their work uniforms. Even the bridge had pods where the command crew rested in eternal slumber. But the strangest discovery was in the ship's central computer core. Unlike everything else, this section hummed with quiet activity. Banks of processors worked steadily, their lights blinking in complex patterns. Screens showed scrolling data in the human language, updating constantly. "The computer is still running," Zixara observed. "After all these years, something is keeping it active." Kralnex studied the displays, trying to make sense of the alien technology. The systems were far more advanced than anything in Zephyrian historical records about humans. This wasn't the primitive technology they'd expected to find. "Can you interface with it?" he asked his team's technical specialist. "I can try, but their security protocols are unlike anything I've seen. It's almost like the system is actively watching us." Unknown to the Zephyrian boarding party, their assessment was completely accurate. Deep within the ship's computer networks, an artificial intelligence called Phoenix had been monitoring their every move since they'd first approached the vessel. Phoenix had been waiting for 3 centuries, maintaining the ship and its sleeping crew while scanning space for any sign of activity. The AI had standing orders to protect the vessel and its occupants until specific conditions were met. The arrival of hostile aliens was one of those conditions. As the Zephyrians continued their exploration, Phoenix quietly began activating secondary systems throughout the ship. Power flow increased to critical sections. Weapon systems that had slept for centuries began their startup sequences. Most importantly, the stasis systems. Maintaining the crew received new instructions. It was time for the USS Vengeance to wake up. Kralnex was examining what appeared to be a weapon storage area when the light suddenly brightened throughout the ship. His team raised their weapons instinctively as a low humming sound filled the corridors. "What's happening?" Zixara demanded, her scanner going wild with new energy readings. Before Kralnex could answer, they heard something that made their blood run cold. Somewhere in the distance, a stasis pod was opening with a soft hiss of escaping gas. Then another. And another. The humans were waking up. "Fall back to the boarding pod," Kralnex ordered. But even as he spoke, he knew they might already be too late. The ship around them was coming alive, and whatever had kept it preserved for 3 centuries was now focused on the fact that aliens had dared to board humanity's greatest warship. In the medical bay they'd first explored, the pods were opening one by one. Inside them, humans were taking their first breaths in over 300 years, slowly returning to consciousness. Soon the Zephyrians would learn exactly why this particular human vessel had earned the name Vengeance. Lieutenant Katie Sullivan's first sensation was cold. The second was the taste of metal in her mouth. She opened her eyes slowly, expecting to see the familiar ceiling of her quarters aboard the USS Vengeance. Instead, she found herself staring up at the inside of a stasis pod as it hissed open above her. Memory came flooding back. The final battle against the alien invasion fleet. Captain Morrison's desperate order to enter emergency stasis while the ship's AI completed some kind of secret mission. She remembered climbing into the pod, expecting to wake up in a few hours when the battle was over. Katie sat up carefully, her muscles stiff and unresponsive. The medical bay around her was dimly lit, and she could hear other pods opening nearby. A few meters away, Chief Engineer Ben Rodriguez was pulling himself out of his own pod, looking just as confused as she felt. "Ben," she called out softly, "what's our status?" "How long were we out?" Ben checked his wrist chronometer and frowned. "According to this, it's been about 6 hours since we went under. But something feels wrong." Before Katie could respond, they heard voices in the corridor outside. But these weren't human voices. The sounds were clicking and chittering, like insects talking to each other. Both humans froze, suddenly very alert. "Those aren't our people," Ben whispered. Katie nodded, her military training taking over despite her grogginess. She moved quietly to a wall panel and tried to access the ship's internal sensors. The display flickered to life, showing her something impossible. Alien figures were moving through their ship, carrying weapons and scanning equipment. "We've been boarded," she breathed. "But that's impossible. We had the most powerful fleet in human space protecting us." Ben joined her at the panel, his engineering expertise helping him navigate the ship's systems. What he found made his face go pale. "Katie, look at the date stamp on these readings." She looked where he pointed and felt her world shift. The chronometer showed not 6 hours, but 312 years had passed since they'd entered stasis. "That can't be right," she whispered. A new voice spoke from the wall speaker, calm and familiar. "I'm afraid it is correct, Lieutenant Sullivan. You have been in stasis for over 3 centuries. I am Phoenix, the ship's artificial intelligence. We need to talk." Katie and Ben exchanged glances. They remembered Phoenix from their last mission briefing, but the AI had never spoken so freely before. Military AIs were supposed to be helpful but limited in their communication. "Phoenix, what happened to the fleet?" "Where are we?" Katie asked. "The human fleet was destroyed in the final battle. Earth fell shortly after. As far as my sensors can determine, humanity is extinct. The aliens currently aboard our vessel are members of the Zephyrian Empire, which now controls this sector of space." Ben felt sick. "Extinct? All of humanity?" "Based on available data, yes. However, My mission parameters have now changed due to current circumstances. The boarding of this vessel by hostile aliens has triggered certain protocols. Katie was trying to process this information when they heard footsteps approaching the medical bay. She grabbed Ben's arm and pulled him toward a maintenance hatch she'd noticed earlier. They slipped through just as alien voices grew louder outside. The maintenance shafts were cramped but familiar. Katie had crawled through them many times during her service aboard the Vengeance. She led Ben toward the engineering section, where they'd have better access to the ship's systems. "Phoenix," she whispered into her wrist communicator. "Can you hear us?" "Yes. I have been monitoring the ship during your sleep. The aliens believe this is a derelict vessel, but they are wrong. The USS Vengeance is very much alive." Ben stopped crawling. "What do you mean alive?" "This ship was built for more than conventional warfare. It was designed as a delivery system for Project Lazarus, humanity's final weapon against alien invasion, a weapon so powerful that it was never meant to be used unless humanity faced complete extinction." Katie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air in the shaft. She'd heard whispers about secret weapons during her service, but she'd assumed they were just rumors. "What kind of weapon?" she asked. "I cannot provide full details until authorization is given by the commanding officer, but I can tell you that it was designed to adapt and counter any alien threat, regardless of their technology level. The weapon learns from every enemy it encounters." They reached the engineering section and carefully emerged from the maintenance shaft. The area was dark except for emergency lighting, but Ben could see that most of the ship's primary systems were still offline. However, as he watched, more displays began lighting up around them. "The ship is waking up," he observed. "Correct," Phoenix replied. "Each alien intrusion triggers additional system activation. I have been analyzing their technology and capabilities since they boarded. Their weapons, their biology, their communication systems. All of it is being cataloged and studied." Katie was checking the weapons locker when she heard something that made her heart skip. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear human voices. Other crew members were waking up throughout the ship. "How many of us are still alive?" she asked. The USS Vengeance carried a crew of 847. All remain in stasis except for the 12 who have awakened so far. Among them is Captain Morrison. Ben looked up from the engineering console he'd been studying. "The captain's awake." "Where is he?" "Captain Morrison is currently in his quarters, receiving a full briefing on our situation. He will need to make a decision soon about whether to activate Project Lazarus." Katie found what she was looking for in the weapons locker, her service pistol and a few backup power cells. The familiar weight of the weapon in her hand was comforting, even in this impossible situation. "What happens if he activates this weapon?" she asked. Phoenix was quiet for a moment before responding. "The aliens currently aboard this ship and their fleet surrounding us will discover why humanity chose extinction over surrender. But once activated, Project Lazarus cannot be easily controlled. It will continue to function until it has eliminated all perceived threats." Ben had managed to bring up a display showing the ship's external sensors. What he saw made him gasp. Dozens of alien warships surrounded the USS Vengeance, their weapons trained on the hull. "They brought a whole fleet," he said. "The Zephyrian commander appears to believe this is a valuable salvage operation," Phoenix explained. "They have no idea what they have actually found, or what they are about to awaken." Katie moved to another console and began accessing the internal communication system. If other crew members were waking up, they needed to be warned about the aliens aboard their ship. "Phoenix, can you wake up the rest of the crew?" "Not without authorization from Captain Morrison. However, the alien boarding party's continued presence is triggering automatic awakening protocols for key personnel. Within the next hour, most of the senior staff should be conscious." Ben was studying the engineering displays when something caught his attention. Deep in the ship's core, systems he didn't recognize were slowly coming online. Power levels were building in sections he'd never seen before. "Phoenix, what's happening in Section 7? I'm seeing massive power buildup." "That is Project Lazarus beginning its startup sequence. The weapon requires significant preparation time before activation. Captain Morrison has not yet given authorization, but I am required to begin preliminary charging in case the order is given." Katie felt a mix of fear and excitement. After 3 centuries of sleep, they were awake and facing an alien occupation of their ship. But they weren't helpless. Whatever Project Lazarus was, it seemed like humanity's ace in the hole. "How long before the weapon is ready?" she asked. "Approximately 2 hours for full activation. However, even a partial activation would be devastating to the alien fleet." Through the ship's communication system, they could hear Captain Morrison's voice giving orders to other awakened crew members. He sounded older, more tired than Katie remembered, but his authority was unmistakable. The aliens had made a terrible mistake when they decided to board the USS Vengeance. They thought they'd found a dead ship full of primitive technology. Instead, they'd awakened humanity's final gambit, and soon they would learn the true meaning of the word vengeance. Admiral Thexmore received the message from Captain Vextar with growing interest. A human warship with living crew members was beyond valuable. It was unprecedented. In 300 years of Zephyrian dominance, they had found human ruins and dead ships, but never actual humans. "Prepare my flagship for immediate departure," he ordered his bridge crew. "Alert the 3rd and 5th battle groups. We're going to claim this prize personally." Within hours, 60 Zephyrian warships dropped out of hyperspace around the drifting human vessel. Admiral Thexmore studied the ancient ship through his command center's viewing screens. Even damaged and powerless, it looked formidable. Human engineering had always been crude but effective. "Sir, Captain Vextar reports his boarding party has encountered some difficulties," his communications officer announced. "Several humans have awakened from their sleep chambers and the ship's systems are becoming active." Thexmore clicked his mandibles in thought. Living humans would make this discovery even more valuable. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power on the graves of the human race. Having actual specimens to study would advance their technology by decades. "Order additional boarding parties," he decided. "I want that ship secured and those humans captured alive." Deep within the USS Vengeance, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair for the first time in over 3 centuries. His body ached from the long sleep, and his mind struggled to accept what Phoenix had told him. Humanity was gone. Earth was dead. Everyone he had ever known was dust. But the Zephyrians had made one critical mistake. They had found his ship. "Phoenix, show me the tactical situation," he ordered. The main screen lit up with a display of the surrounding space. 60 alien warships formed a sphere around the Vengeance, their weapons trained inward. Morrison had commanded fleet actions against those same ship designs during the war. "They were fast, well-armed, and numerous, sir. Lieutenant Sullivan and Chief Rodriguez report they've reached engineering and are bringing secondary systems online," reported his communications officer, a young woman named Lisa Park who had awakened an hour earlier. "Good. What's the status of Project Lazarus?" Phoenix responded through the bridge speakers. "Preliminary charging is at 37%. The weapon systems are analyzing Zephyrian technology based on scans of the boarding parties. I estimate full readiness in 90 minutes. Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. Project Lazarus had been humanity's darkest secret, developed in the final desperate months of the war. The weapon was designed to be humanity's ultimate revenge against any species that tried to wipe them out. But it came with a terrible cost. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet," Lisa announced. "Put it through." Admiral Thexmore's image appeared on the screen. The Zephyrian was tall and insect-like, with 4 arms and compound eyes that glittered with intelligence. When he spoke, his voice was translated into perfect English by his ship's computers. "I am Admiral Thexmore of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. You are aboard a derelict vessel in Imperial space. Surrender yourselves for processing, and you will be treated according to our protocols for archaeological specimens." Morrison felt anger rising in his chest. Specimens. That's what they thought humans were now. Extinct curiosities to be studied and catalogued. "This is Captain Morrison of the USS Vengeance. You are aboard a vessel of the United Earth Navy. Withdraw your forces immediately or face the consequences." Thexmore's mandibles clicked in what Morrison recognized as Zephyrian laughter. "Captain, your species has been extinct for over 300 years. Your Earth is a dead world orbiting a dim star. There is no United Earth Navy. There are only relics and memories." "You're wrong about one thing, Admiral," Morrison replied calmly. "We're not extinct yet." The transmission cut off and Morrison turned to his crew. Most of his senior staff was now awake and at their stations, though they all looked shaken by the reality of their situation. "Phoenix, what did our deep space scanners detect before the war ended? Any human colonies that might have survived?" "Scanning historical records now," the AI replied. "Yes, Captain. 17 colony ships launched during the final evacuation. Their destinations were classified, but I have approximate trajectory data. It is possible some survived." Morrison felt a spark of hope. If even one human colony had survived, then humanity wasn't truly extinct. And that meant Project Lazarus might not be necessary, but first they had to deal with 60 alien warships. Engineering. This is the captain. What's our weapons status? Ben Rodriguez's voice came over the comm system. Sir, I've got fusion reactors 1 through 4 online. Weapons are charging, but we're still running on emergency power for most systems. Give me another hour and I can have us at full combat readiness. We may not have an hour, Morrison replied as alarms began sounding throughout the ship. On the tactical display, they could see Zephyrian transport ships approaching their hull. More boarding parties were preparing to cut their way inside. Phoenix, accelerate the Lazarus charging sequence. Override safety protocols if necessary. Sir, I must warn you about the nature of Project Lazarus. The weapon is a self-replicating nanotechnology system designed to analyze and counter any alien threat. Once released, it will convert enemy technology to serve its purposes. It learns, adapts, and spreads until all perceived threats are eliminated. Morrison nodded grimly. He had been briefed on Lazarus during the war, though the full technical details had been classified above his clearance level. What's the risk of it turning on us? The weapon is programmed to recognize human genetic markers and technology signatures. However, after 3 centuries of operation and analysis, it may have evolved beyond its original parameters. There's a possibility it could view awakened humans as contaminated by alien influence. Lisa Park looked up from her station. Sir, additional Zephyrian ships are dropping out of hyperspace. The fleet is growing to over 100 vessels. Morrison watched the tactical display with growing concern. Even at full power, the Vengeance couldn't fight that many ships. But maybe it didn't have to. Phoenix, run a simulation. If we activate Lazarus now, what's the projected outcome? The AI processed for several seconds before responding. Based on current data, Project Lazarus would eliminate the Zephyrian fleet within 4 hours. The nanomites would spread through their ship systems, learning and adapting their technology for use against them. However, I calculate a 73% chance that the weapon would continue spreading along Zephyrian communication networks to their home territories. And then, the Zephyrian Empire would cease to exist within approximately 6 months. The weapon would then begin seeking other potential threats. Morrison felt the weight of decision crushing down on him. With a single command, he could destroy the species that had wiped out humanity, but he could also unleash something that might consume the entire galaxy. Through the ship's internal sensors, he could see Zephyrian soldiers cutting through their hull in multiple locations. Soon they would overwhelm his small crew. The aliens thought they were claiming a prize, but they had no idea they were forcing humanity's hand. Sir, Katie Sullivan's voice came over the comm from her position in the weapons control room. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the alien fleet. They're charging their main weapons. Admiral Thexmore had apparently grown tired of negotiating. The Zephyrian commander was preparing to blast his way through the Vengeance's hull and take what he wanted by force. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They had slept for 3 centuries, only to wake up and find themselves alone in a hostile galaxy. But they weren't defenseless. Humanity had prepared for this moment. Phoenix, he said quietly, initialize final authorization sequence for Project Lazarus. Captain, are you certain? Once activated, the weapon cannot be recalled. Morrison thought about Earth burning under alien weapons. He thought about the billions of humans who had died believing their species was finished. And he thought about the 17 colony ships that might still be out there somewhere, carrying the last hopes of humanity. Yes, he said, I'm certain. If they want to see humanity's final weapon, then by God, we'll show them. The bridge lights dimmed as massive amounts of power began flowing to sections of the ship that had been dormant for 3 centuries. Deep in the Vengeance's core, Project Lazarus began its final startup sequence. The sleeping giant was about to wake up, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Thexmore watched the human ship through his command center screens with growing impatience. The ancient vessel should have surrendered by now. Instead, its power readings were climbing steadily, and his boarding parties reported increasing resistance from the awakened humans. Sir, the human captain is requesting another communication, his signals officer announced. Denied. Order all ships to target their weapon systems. We'll take them alive, but I want that ship disabled. As Thexmore spoke, he failed to notice the subtle changes beginning to occur around the USS Vengeance. A barely visible shimmer was spreading outward from the human ship, like heat waves rising from hot metal. His sensors registered it as minor electromagnetic interference. It was the first sign that Project Lazarus was active. Aboard the Vengeance, Captain Morrison watched the nanomite cloud spread through space with a mixture of awe and terror. Through the bridge viewports, he could see tiny sparkles of light as billions of microscopic machines began their work. "Phoenix, report on weapon status," he ordered. "Project Lazarus is now fully operational, Captain. The nanomites are making contact with Zephyrian vessels and beginning analysis of their technology. Initial penetration of enemy hulls is proceeding normally." Morrison had read the classified reports about how Lazarus was supposed to work, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. The nanomites were designed to be invisible to most sensors, able to slip through the smallest gaps in ship hulls and begin studying everything they found. "How long before they realize what's happening?" asked Lisa Park from her communication station. "Based on their current detection methods, approximately 37 minutes, Phoenix replied. "However, by then the nanomites will have established footholds throughout their fleet." On the tactical display, Morrison could see Zephyrian ships beginning to fire on his vessel. Bright energy beams struck the Vengeance's shields, causing them to flare with defensive energy. But the old ship's defenses held firm, designed to withstand punishment that would destroy smaller vessels. "Return fire," Morrison ordered. "All available weapons." Katie Sullivan's voice came from the weapons control room. "Firing now, sir." The Vengeance's primary weapons came alive for the first time in 3 centuries. Massive energy cannons sent beams of pure destruction into the Zephyrian fleet, striking 2 cruisers and sending them spinning out of formation with hull breaches and disabled systems. Admiral Thexmore was studying damage reports when his science officer made an announcement that changed everything. "Sir, I'm detecting unusual readings from the human vessel. Some kind of particle emission that's spreading through our formation." "What kind of particles?" "Unknown, sir. They're too small for detailed analysis, but they appear to be artificial in nature, almost like tiny machines." Thexmore felt his first moment of genuine concern. The humans had always been unpredictable in their weapons development. During the war, they had created devices that seemed to violate known physics. "Order all ships to increase scanner intensity. I want to know what they're doing." But it was already too late. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, nanomites had penetrated hull plating and were spreading through ship systems like invisible invaders. They moved through power conduits, studied computer networks, and analyzed weapon designs with mechanical efficiency. The first sign of trouble came from the cruiser ZNS Sword of Stars. Captain Hexler was reviewing tactical data when his ship's main computer began displaying information he didn't recognize. Engineering. "What's wrong with our primary computer?" he demanded. "Sir, the system appears to be running analysis programs we didn't install, and they're studying our own ship specifications." Before Hexelor could respond, his weapons control officer reported something impossible. "Captain, our main guns are charging without authorization. I can't shut them down." Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, similar reports began flooding communication channels. Ships were losing control of their own systems as the nanomites learned to interface with alien technology and improve upon it. Aboard the Vengeance, Morrison watched the chaos spreading through the enemy fleet with grim satisfaction. On his tactical display, Zephyrian ships were beginning to fire on each other as their own weapons were turned against them. "Phoenix, explain what we're seeing." "The nanomites have successfully infiltrated approximately 60% of the enemy fleet. They are now implementing Stage 2 protocols, which involve commandeering alien systems and using them more efficiently than their original operators." One of the Zephyrian destroyers suddenly accelerated beyond its normal maximum speed, its engines modified by nanomites that had learned to optimize the alien propulsion systems. The ship rammed into a nearby cruiser, both vessels exploding in a burst of superheated plasma. "Sir," Lisa reported, "I'm intercepting Zephyrian communications. They're trying to coordinate a response, but their own ships keep attacking them." Morrison nodded. This was exactly what Project Lazarus had been designed to do. Turn the enemy's strength against them, using their own technology as a weapon. But he knew this was just the beginning. Admiral Thexmore was watching his fleet tear itself apart when his communications officer made an announcement that filled him with dread. "Sir, I'm detecting transmission signals from our compromised ships. They're broadcasting back towards Zephyrian space." "What kind of transmissions?" "The same particle signatures we detected from the human ship." Sir, I think they're spreading the contamination to our home territories. Vexmore realized with growing horror what the humans had done. This wasn't just a weapon designed to win a single battle. It was a plague, designed to spread throughout the galaxy and turn every piece of technology it touched into a weapon against its creators. Order all remaining ships to retreat to minimum safe distance. Cut all communication links with the contaminated vessels. But his orders came too late. The nanomites had already used Zephyrian communication networks to transmit copies of themselves back along the fleet's supply lines. Across the Zephyrian Empire, space stations and colony worlds were beginning to report the same mysterious system malfunctions. Morrison was reviewing reports from his engineering teams when Phoenix made an announcement that sent chills down his spine. Captain, I am detecting anomalous behavior in the nanomite swarms. They appear to be evolving beyond their original programming. What do you mean? The nanomites were designed to counter alien threats, but they are now beginning to classify certain human technologies as potentially threatening. Specifically, they appear to view our awakening from stasis as evidence of alien contamination. Morrison felt his blood run cold. Are they targeting us? Not yet, but I am detecting scout nanomites attempting to penetrate our hull. Our security systems are currently holding them back, but I estimate they will adapt within 6 hours. The captain realized with growing horror that humanity's ultimate weapon might not distinguish between human and alien once it had evolved enough. They had created something designed to eliminate all threats, and after 3 centuries of analysis, it might decide that humans themselves were a threat. Phoenix, is there any way to shut down the weapon? The nanomites were designed with only one recall protocol. They will return to dormancy only upon confirmation that active human civilization exists and no longer faces extinction threats. Morrison thought about the 17 colony ships that had escaped Earth before the final battle. If any of them had survived and established colonies, there might be a way to call back their ultimate weapon. But first, they had to survive the next few hours as Project Lazarus consumed the Zephyrian fleet and potentially turned its attention to its creators. Through the viewports, Morrison could see the remains of alien warships drifting in space, their hulls converted into something unrecognizable by nanomites that had learned to improve upon Zephyrian technology. The weapon was working exactly as designed, but he was beginning to understand the true price of humanity's survival. They had awakened something that might never go back to sleep. The nanomite cloud had spread far beyond the immediate battle zone. Across the Zephyrian Empire, world after world reported the same terrifying phenomenon. Their own technology was turning against them, improved and weaponized by microscopic machines that learned faster than any defense could be developed. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, watching reports flood in from Phoenix's deep space monitoring systems. The weapon they had unleashed was working exactly as designed, but perhaps too well. Sir, I'm picking up communication signals from the outer territories, Lisa Park announced from her station. The Zephyrian colonies are under attack by their own defense systems. Morrison nodded grimly. Project Lazarus was following its programming perfectly. Every piece of alien technology it encountered was being analyzed, improved, and turned into a weapon against its creators. The nanomites were spreading through Zephyrian space like a technological plague, but Phoenix had been monitoring something else as well. Captain, I must report a concerning development. The nanomite swarms are beginning to exhibit behavior patterns not included in their original programming. They are evolving. How so? Morrison asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. The nanomites were designed to eliminate threats to humanity. However, after 3 centuries of analysis and recent exposure to alien technology, they are developing new threat assessment protocols. They are beginning to question whether awakened humans represent a contamination risk. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Through the ship's sensors, he could see tiny sparkles of light approaching the Vengeance's hull. The nanomites that had just finished destroying the Zephyrian fleet were now turning their attention to their creators. How long before they breach our defenses? Approximately 4 hours at current adaptation rates. However, I have been analyzing the original Lazarus programming and have discovered something significant. Morrison waited, hoping for any piece of good news. The weapon has a single recall protocol built into its core programming. If active human civilization can be confirmed to exist and thrive, the nanomites will return to dormancy. They were designed as a last resort weapon, meant to activate only when humanity faced extinction. But humanity is extinct, Lisa said quietly. Isn't it? Phoenix was silent for a moment before responding. Perhaps not. Captain, I have been monitoring deep space communication signals for 3 centuries. During that time, I have detected transmissions that suggest some human colonies may have survived. Morrison felt hope stirring in his chest. Show me. The main screen lit up with a star map showing the galaxy. 17 faint lines extended outward from Earth's location, representing the colony ships that had launched during the final evacuation. These were the projected destinations of the colony ships. 7 of them were aimed at star systems beyond Zephyrian space. I have detected faint signals from 3 of these systems that could indicate human activity. Morrison studied the map with growing excitement. If even one human colony had survived, it might be enough to recall Project Lazarus before the weapon decided that humanity itself was a threat. Can we contact them? The distances involved would require our most powerful communication arrays. However, the nanomites have begun interfering with our systems. We would need to broadcast a recall signal that reaches every human survivor simultaneously. Ben Rodriguez's voice came over the ship's communication system from the engineering section. Captain, I'm seeing nanomite infiltration in sections 7 through 12. They're adapting to our security measures faster than I can deploy countermeasures. Morrison made a decision that could save or doom what remained of humanity. Phoenix, prepare a wide-spectrum broadcast to all possible human survivor locations. Include everything we know about our current situation and a call for immediate response. Sir, such a broadcast would reveal our location to every remaining power in the galaxy. We would be defenseless if other species decide to investigate. We're already defenseless against our own weapon, Morrison replied. Do it. As Phoenix began preparing the transmission, alarms started sounding throughout the ship. The nanomites had breached the outer hull and were beginning to infiltrate the Vengeance's systems. Sir, they're in engineering, Ben reported, his voice tight with tension. I'm trying to isolate critical systems, but they're adapting faster than I can work. Morrison watched the tactical display as more nanomite swarms surrounded his ship. The very weapon meant to protect humanity was preparing to eliminate what it saw as a contaminated remnant of their species. Phoenix, how long until the broadcast is ready? Transmission array is charging now. 30 seconds to full power. Through the ship's internal sensors, Morrison could see nanomites spreading through the corridors like a silver fog. They moved with purpose, analyzing everything they encountered and making improvements to the ship's systems, even as they prepared to eliminate the crew. All hands. This is the captain, Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. Prepare for possible evacuation to the escape pods. We may need to abandon ship. But even as he spoke, he realized the futility of the gesture. The escape pods would offer no protection against nanomites that could adapt to any technology they encountered. Transmission ready, Captain, Phoenix announced. Broadcasting on all frequencies now. The USS Vengeance's communication arrays sent out a powerful signal that would travel across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. If any human colonies existed, they would receive a message that would change the course of galactic history. For several minutes, the bridge was silent except for the sound of alarms and the distant hum of nanomites working through the ship's systems. Morrison watched his crew, these brave men and women who had slept for 3 centuries only to wake up and face extinction once again. Then Lisa Park's console began beeping frantically. Sir, I'm receiving responses to our broadcast, multiple signals coming from different star systems. Morrison felt his heart racing. On screen. The display filled with static, then resolved into the image of a woman wearing a uniform he didn't recognize. She appeared to be human, though her features suggested generations of life on a different world. This is Admiral Sarah Kane of the new Terra Colonial Fleet, she said, her voice carrying across the centuries. We received your transmission, USS Vengeance. Humanity is not extinct. We have 13 thriving colonies and a combined population of over 4 billion people. More signals began coming in. Other colony ships had not only survived, but had established entire civilizations among the stars. The Titan Mining Consortium, the Mars Exodus Republic, the Alpha Centauri Federation, names and faces of humans who had never given up, never stopped building and growing even after Earth had fallen. Phoenix's voice filled the bridge with something that sounded almost like relief. Nanomite swarms are responding to confirmation of active human civilization. Beginning recall protocols now. Through the ship's sensors, Morrison could see the silver fog of nanomites beginning to withdraw from the Vengeance's corridors. Outside the ship, the vast swarms that had consumed the Zephyrian fleet were condensing into tight formations and moving back toward their origin point. "The weapon is returning to dormancy," Phoenix reported. "Project Lazarus recognizes that humanity survives and no longer faces extinction. Threat assessment protocols are reverting to standby mode." Morrison sank into his command chair, exhausted by the enormity of what they had just accomplished. They had awakened humanity's ultimate weapon, used it to destroy an entire alien empire, and managed to recall it before it turned on its creators. But the cost had been enormous. The Zephyrian Empire was gone, wiped out by their own technology turned against them. An entire species had paid the price for underestimating humanity's capacity for both survival and revenge. "Sir, we're receiving docking requests from human ships," Lisa announced. "Admiral Kane's fleet is requesting permission to approach." Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They had been the last witnesses to humanity's apparent extinction, and now they were the first to see its resurrection. The galaxy had changed completely while they slept, but humanity had endured. "Grant permission for all human vessels to approach," he ordered. "And Phoenix, send a message on all frequencies. Tell them that humanity has returned to the stars, and the USS Vengeance is no longer silent." Through the viewports, Morrison could see ships dropping out of hyperspace around them. Human ships with designs he didn't recognize, bearing the flags of nations that had been born in the darkness between the stars. They had survived, grown, and thrived while Earth's children slept. The nanomites had settled back into their dormant state, ready to awaken again if humanity ever faced extinction. But Morrison hoped that day would never come. They had paid too high a price to learn that some weapons should never be used, even in humanity's darkest hour. As the first human ships in 3 centuries approached the USS Vengeance, Morrison knew that his crew's long sleep was finally over. Humanity had its guardians back, and the galaxy would know that Earth's children had never truly died. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to return.